Have you ever wondered how your sales performance compares against your competitors and peers? The B2B Sales Benchmark Report provides the definitive guide to what success looks like in 2021. See how you compare in terms of win rate, sales cycle, average deal value, relationships, and engagement. You can see the results and get the full report at ebster.com/B2B-sales-benchmarks. This is Sales Ops Demystified, the number one most downloaded podcast in sales operations. We invite the brightest minds in sales operations onto the show to deconstruct the why, what, and how behind rep productivity, forecasting, metrics, and all things revenue. This podcast is brought to you by Ebster, the leading customer engagement platform for Salesforce. Hello and welcome to another very special episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. We're joined by Kendall Grant, who is actually the first person we've had on who has sales operations experience at Google, which I'm super interested in. Since then, he's also been running sales ops at two other businesses, Fastly and AnyPerk. Kendall, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And before we kick off, looking very smooth.
Thank you. It is Halloween here in the States, so we have our annual costume contest, and they do a good job of bribing us to dress up because we always donate to a charity for everyone that dresses up. We give a certain amount.
Fantastic. I want to kick off with the first question about how you actually got into the profession.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think as a lot of former people in sales ops, at least the people in my network that I know, we are a bunch of either like burnt out or reformed consultants or bankers. Or salespeople, and so I was a former consultant, and then I went to Google and I did sales there. Moved into product side after that as a product expert at Google. Then after that, finally moved into sales ops. And so for there, I found sales ops was pretty interesting because I got to do a lot of different things. And I like the ability to be an all-around athlete and not only look at sales numbers, but also do a lot of process change and program management and things like that.
Got it. And so Google was the first place where you actually had a role of sales operations.
Yeah. That was the first place. Yeah. I was on the Central America Sales Ops team, looking at a lot of the overall business planning and strategy for the Americas. And I also did a stint for a quarter out in APAC, helped spinning up the for work business there on the operations side.
Got it. So you didn't join Google into a sales ops role. You moved internally into that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I did sales there for about 2 years, and then did a mobile product expert role for about a year. I was really doing a lot of the analytics on that side, and then going to sales ops after that.
Got it. And what kind of made you want to switch from sales and then to product expert and then to sales operations? Like, why did you not just stay in sales?
Yeah, so I think sales at Google it's a little bit different. It's more account management. Like, you're still responsible for a big number, right? But you're not going out and cold calling and prospecting people, even though it's still sales. So it's more getting deeper in the number of accounts that you have. And I think for me, I just wanted to do more and find out what else is out there. Where it's like, I do love talking to people, I do love talking to customers, but I don't find the joy in that every day. And because you have such big accounts, you're talking to the same people over and over again, right? So you build very, very deep relationships. But after a while, for me, it's like, okay, I think I built a ton of relationships here, but what else can I do? And I want to see more parts of the business, right? And so I was very interested in going into mobile products at that time at Google, because we just started coming out with enhanced campaigns, which basically we switched all our AdWords to be mobile first. So it's sort of like looking at it, like sort of doing a startup within Google, right? It's like, okay, you need to make this big product change. this is a team that's going to lead it. Like, how do we do that change across the org, right? It's essentially a new product we're rolling out that affects all of our advertisers in Google's biggest business. And so I found that very interesting and rewarding. It's the hardest I think I've ever worked in my life, or one of the hardest times I worked in my life, like taking calls at all crazy hours. But it's definitely rewarding. Then after that, it was sort of like, hey, this team is disbanded. You have your pick of where you want to go. Do you want to go back into sales? Do you want to go into sales ops? Things like that. And I was really sold on the sales ops job. They really wanted the analytical background that I had for the Central Americas team. And I already knew some people on there that I worked pretty closely with. So it seemed like a good fit.
Got it. And then if we fast forward to today at Fastly, can you just give us a sense of how many people there are in operations and then how many reps that you guys are responsible for?
Yeah, so I think at Fastly, so on the operations team, we have two sides of the house. We have our sales ops team, and then we also have our client services ops team, and we all rolled up into our VP of field and services operations globally. And so on my ops team, we have 5 folks, including myself. We have a sales enablement team of 3 people now, and then we have a client services team of 3 as well, client services ops team. And we support about 100 plus folks worldwide. So that includes sellers, account managers, technical account managers, and also the CS, the client services side of the house.
Got it. Awesome. And your current tech stack?
Yeah, so our current tech stack, we use a lot of different tools. So obviously Salesforce, like everyone else. We do use Discover or ZoomInfo, or Discover org by ZoomInfo now. I know that we had Datanyze. I know that Datanyze, ZoomInfo bought Datanyze, and Discover org bought ZoomInfo recently. Yeah. So we just re-signed with them to do the whole Discover org package. We do CPQ in Salesforce. Used to be StillBrit, so we have that. We use Outreach IO for emails. We have Loopio for RFPs. We use Slack internally, very Slack heavy culture here. We use Domo as our business intelligence tool. We have Exactly for commissions. And then we use LinkedIn Sales Navigator also for prospecting. And then we currently have Eloqua, but we are switching to Marketo, and that switch will hopefully happen by the end of the year.
Got it. Pretty comprehensive overview of the tools there.
Yeah.
Now I want to talk about data quality. Is that your responsibility or your team's responsibility to make sure that everything is shipshape in Salesforce?
Yeah, definitely. So that's a shared responsibility we take along with marketing ops, right? And so we typically, data quality comes into play when we're doing our territory management and quota allocation at the beginning of every year. So we're deep in it right now, where it's like, we want to score all the accounts. We want to split up the territories. We want to cut the regions, make sure we have balanced territories so we can assign quota rationally. So we're doing that right now. We'll clean up a lot of the data in that process. And we'll also work with marketing ops as far as on the inbound side to say like, hey, how do we enrich a lot of the leads we get in and get accurate data on that, right? And so we use a combination of Discover org and LeadSpace for that as far as to enrich things. And then obviously for, people we get at events and things like that, marketing will also enrich that data and make sure that data is accurate as well with our what we currently have in Salesforce. And so it's a shared responsibility, and we also rely on the SDRs and the sellers too when they see something and their patch doesn't look right to always come back to us and we can fix and correct that data. But we definitely take the initiative there and usually are the first pass at any data that touches to make sure that it is clean and that it is accurate for our sellers.
Got it. And that was going to be my next question about working with salespeople and getting them to kind of do stuff that you want them to do. So do you just say, if you see anything strange or weird, just let us know and we'll pick it up?
Yeah, that's what we usually do. We usually say like, hey, because we tell them, we're like, hey, we're probably we aim to be, the whole 80-20 rule, 80% accurate, right? Get most of it right. But you're patched better than us, right? And especially now we see a lot of consolidation, like for example, especially in the media space these days, right? So we're like, we're not on the tip of the spear saying like, oh, well, this new, big media conglomerate brought all of these companies, right? So we expect our sellers to know that because that's their business and that's their patch, where it's like, hey, actually this company was bought by this other company, they're going to stand at the end of the year. So we can either make the appropriate parent-child relationships, or mark that company as out of business in our system.
Got it. And then moving on, or actually staying with the salespeople, do you have initiatives around productivity at the moment? Like, what are the things that you're doing that are trying to drive their productivity?
Yeah. So our big initiative at the moment now is we want to decrease ramp times, and they can get people productive and sooner, get them to close their first deal sooner. And so one of the big initiatives we're in the throes of right now that we'll roll out next year at our sales kickoff is sales playbooks, right? Something we've never had here before. So we're using a consulting company for that to help us do these workshops with product and with product marketing and sellers to design like, hey, what are our target customer profiles, get really deep, more granular into personas, and then get sales input and being like, hey, when we're talking to customers like this, like this is how we can walk through the Fastly sales process and standardize that for each vertical that we have.
Got it. So the real focus on ramp time, getting people in and then calling straight away. If you wouldn't mind, so we're kind of going through this as well at the same time. We're like working on our SDR ramp time. What do you like expect as like an average period to get someone from joining to actually like hitting their numbers?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's different for all industries, right? At Fastly, we are very, very technical, right? We're an edge cloud, and we use traditional CDN and WAF, bot protection, media shield, and image optimization, and other products. But everything we sell is typically with the sales engineer that's heavily involved. It involves POC. We have a very, very technical product, and so our ramp time is rather long, especially for big deals. Right? At least to get a seller up and running, to get a seller until they feel good. So it's usually in the past, there's usually been a 9-month ramp time for sellers to feel comfortable. We've heard, right? So we're actually going to start measuring it, and we're still trying to think of what metrics we want to use for that. But typically it's like 9 months here. If you work in one of our smaller teams here, it's about a 6-month ramp time, I would say. And so we're hoping that, the sales playbook, what we want to do is we have very senior sellers here that have worked in the CDN business, worked at Fastly a long time. You want to take all that knowledge, tribal knowledge out of their heads and disseminate that to the rest of the org. So when somebody starts new, they can just have that playbook in front of them saying like, oh, this is how I sell Fastly. This is how I should pitch Fastly. This is who I should be targeting. If I find this scenario in a POC and stuff like that, this is how I should handle it with my, with my sales engineer. And so that's our main, focus of these playbooks, where it's like, hey, we want to give people a path to consume all this knowledge, and an easy path to always reference that going forward.
Got it. So it's just, I like that term, like trying to suck all the knowledge from the whole organization and then push it into the sales person.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we have people in the CDN business here that have been here since the start of Fastly, even before Fastly, and they've always worked in the industry. And so it's like, all right, yeah, how do we get that internal knowledge that they have and put that into other people's brains?
Got it. Moving on to the forecasting process, did that sit with your team?
Yeah, so forecasting sits with us. We currently use Salesforce forecasting. We do weekly forecasts is what we do. And so we always forecast new business, so that new business that comes into the company. And then we also forecast renewals and upsells and downsells, right? Where it's like for our current customer base, if you're handling that, do we see a big re-rate coming? Like, do we see a big upsell coming? You want to know about that as well. And so we track that on a weekly basis for all teams. And so my sales ops leads lead that for each of the teams that they run, right? And we roll that all up and we put that stuff in the Domos. We track that. Hey, what is the management committing to us? Where do we look against quota? And then we also have a team commit. What is the team committing to us outside of the manager commit? There's the 3 metrics that we look at. And then we also have a monthly, we call it a senior forecasting call, where we sit down, with our finance VPs, and then we sit down with our senior managers, our senior VPs, to look at just holistically, hey, for this quarter, what are the big deals that we're looking at? And then also, what are the big re-rates that we need to get ahead of, that we see that are coming, so we can make sure that deal desk is involved. And we have a good path to figure out, how we want to handle these customers coming up for renewal.
Just quickly jumping back to the 3 metrics, to the 3 kind of forecasts you have. So you have the rep commits, I believe.
Yep.
Manager commits, and then you have like a top-down forecast. Is that right?
Yeah, so what do I mean by that? So like we have the rep roll up that we have. So they give us a commit. So we call it a team commit. And then we ask the manager separately, all right, based upon your team commit, what for your sense of the team, you work with them every day, is that high or low, right? So we track a separate manager's commit where it's like, okay, manager, we want to hold you accountable. You realize, some reps, might be over enthusiastic. Some reps might be a little shy. And so we ask the manager, you need to also submit your commit separate of the team. And so we usually see that either be haircut a little bit, or they might push it a little bit more and saying like, hey, like this is actually going to be the forecast, right? And then obviously we have our quota, and so we look at that as well, saying like, hey, are we actually forecasting to quota or not? And obviously, if not, we dig in and figure out how do we close the gap there.
Cool. And then you have that times 3 for new business, re-rates, and then there was something else, upsells.
Yeah, upsells. So re-rates and upsells are the same. So that's just basically renewals. So we look at the renewals. And then we also look at the new business as well.
God, it's pretty robust forecasting process. Got a bit of a curveball for you here. So because you've had, is it approximately 8 years experience in sales ops now? Or slightly more?
Yeah.
Okay. In those 8 years, which sales metric, gets you the most excited, or not excited, but is the most insightful for you, or the most interesting?
The most insightful or most interesting? That is a very good question. I think one of the metrics that I always I always look at is everyone looks at, hey, this is the actual win rate, right? Or it's like, oh, this is actually the closed deals plus the won deals, right? I mean, so the won deals divided by whatever was closed, right? It was won or lost, right? Like that's right. But I actually like looking at that, weighted, but also, hey, I want to see what deals are actually still open. Like, let's say in later stages, let's say if you have a 5-stage step, let's say stage 3 or greater, right? Because that gives me a better approximation of hey, okay, what did we actually win, and are we actually moving deals through the funnel, right?
Got it.
So it gives a bit more nuance where it's like, yeah, I know our win rate is high after the stuff we just closed, but we could see on smaller teams where it's like, well, this person only has 1 or 2 deals that they actually move through, this quarter, so their win rate's 100%. That's not really true. They have all this stuff out here sitting in let's say their stages like negotiation or evaluation, right? Sitting out there that hasn't moved anything. Right. And so if we take in some of the stuff that's open and what stage they're actually in, that'll give us a true, for me, a better sense of what are we actually winning, and our win rate just inflated because we're not moving deals through or we're leaving deals out.
Got it. So you're saying that sometimes the win rate metric can be limited in that it's only about the deals.
Yeah, exactly. Especially obviously sellers are optimistic, so they'll just leave deals open and open and open and open and open. So if you take some cut of that into consideration, you have a better idea of oh, this is what we're actually winning. This stuff here that's just open. This, something needs to happen with this. These deals should have moved that at some point in time.
So we should probably give this new metric a name, right? Or do you already have a name for it?
I don't have a name for it, and it's not I think I've heard this metric. I'm part of the Modern Sales Pro group run by Pete Kinsey up in San Francisco, and so I think I heard it from one of his talks, or maybe a talk with somebody in that group. So I'm definitely not taking credit for that metric, but I did find it very, very interesting.
Okay, fair enough. I just wrote down true win rate.
Yeah,
that's what I'm going to be calling it going forward.
Okay.
Awesome. And then my final question is about who in the sales ops game has taught you the most?
Yeah, that's a very good question, since I think I've learned a little bit along the way. And so I definitely think my former sales ops managers at Google, Maggie and Eduardo, both former McKinsey consultant. I was a former consultant. And so they were really good about, the big picture, how do we move, or Google has, tens of thousands of sellers. How do we do change management and move an org of 10,000, present a business plan for 10,000 people in front of executives Nikesh and Margot, right? So they're really good about framing and shaping the story and presenting that and looking at, and they were always good about, hey, just don't show a number. You always need to show a number in context, right? And we're always looking for patterns. Patterns is what will make any sales successful, where it's like, do we see a pattern of, and how do we scale out those best practices, right? Like that's what we always want to focus on in sales ops, like to make people more efficient. And so always working with them on that, and always keeping that top of mind. And I think Maggie was always pretty smart about, hey, if you see some slide, like, that you see somewhere else in some other presentation, like, always, have that slide and take that and use it for your own use, right? Because a lot of people do a lot of different decks. And she's like, we don't expect everyone to have the greatest deck, but if something resonates with you, you should keep that in your wheelhouse, right? So always feel free to look at other slides and incorporate that into your presentation. So I find that very useful. And I think working now, I work with Kent Corson here at Fastly, and then, I just learned a lot from him. Just talk about, he always talks about, here we're doing the stuff that they don't teach you like in B school, right? So it's like, hey, how do we, at Fastly, we're growing super rapidly, we went public this year, we have big plans for the future. How do we do that change management? How do we do the planning when we have a lot of stuff unknown? And how do we actually make those trade-offs, right? And so it's a lot of stuff behind the scenes where it's like, how do you build relationships with the sales leaders and build that trust? But also, how do you have that frank conversation of, hey, we need to invest here, or we need to invest here, and these are the trade-offs, and lay it out for people on the table so we can have that honest conversation of what's best for the business.
Awesome. That was a really good, fast-paced download of Sales Ops wisdom. Thank you so much, Kendall. Here are the things I particularly like. Obviously, the new metric that we may give credit to modern sales pros, but we're calling true win rate, which is not just taking into account the actual win rate, because maybe the salesperson is keeping deals here and not closing them out. The forecasting process sounded really, really robust, and having weekly for both new business and re-rate / upsells from the 3 different points of view. I think that I've heard something so detailed, in my words, robust. And then finally, the point about the playbooks and documenting the wisdom, or collecting the wisdom, documenting it, and then trying to feed that to these people so they can get in and hit the ground as fast as possible. Kendall, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. If you are listening on a podcast listening application, then please subscribe, rate, and review. And if you have any questions about the show, if you know a guest, or if you have any questions about sales operations, just hit me up at tomhunt@ebster.com. That's tomhunt@ebster.com.